Hello, everyone. I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Billy. Welcome to the Horse Frog Podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors.
Today, we will be discussing Book 4, Chapter 21 of Memories of Ice, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is part 1 of our coverage of this chapter.
Did I hear you say Book 4, sir?
You did, good sir.
This podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it's most definitely not a replacement to reading the books. Both Kamraun and I know that this series is the best fantasy story ever written, and that we're approaching this from a purely fanboy point of view. No literary critique of Mr. Erikson's beautiful work here.
We'll be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that haven't read the books. We'll try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book.
Quick warning, today's episode contains descriptions of adult topics not suitable for children.
Our show is listener supported. If you'd like to support us, we'd really appreciate it. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we're posting ad-free episodes on Patreon weekly.
Also, we'd really like to hear from you, and we really do mean that. So send any feedback or comments that you have to contact@horsefrogproductions.com.
All right, following our discussion of the views on paternity in tribes last week, we received an email from Jeff, one of our listeners, pointing us to partible paternity. Thank you, Jeff. This is exactly what we were looking for in terms of getting context around this idea. Partible paternity, also known as shared paternity, is a cultural belief in some indigenous societies, particularly in lowland South America, that a child can have multiple biological fathers. This belief system often involves multiple men contributing semen to the mother's body over time, leading to the conception and development of the fetus. In some cases, these multiple men are also seen as having a social role as fathers, providing care and resources for the child. In these scenarios, children have better outcomes because they have access to more resources and paternal support through multiple fathers. Violence against children is reduced because the fathers all believe that they contributed to the child genetically. Sexual jealousy is one of the cited downsides of this belief system. In the context of the Rivi tribes, maybe this is what we were hearing about, with the men gossiping and complaining about the women making great sport of bedding the wrong husband. Jeff also pointed out that in the West, we have a more individualistic view of things, and as such, we care more about our genes being passed on because we care about the individual versus the success of the tribe as a whole in other societies. To your point last week, Billy, maybe this system works only when it's a relatively small tribe and they don't know how children are actually scientifically conceived.
Right. It's funny. A lot of these things can work on a sealed system for the most part, but it has to be a totally sealed system a lot of times for these things to kind of work in. But yeah, it's interesting.
Well, thanks again, Jeff. That really helps provide the context around where this belief system could come from for the Rivi tribes, and I appreciate understanding that viewpoint.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you reaching out to us.
All right. Book 4, Memories of Ice.
He said the name of the book. He said the name of the book.
The chapter begins with a quote, "First in, last out," end quote. And that is the motto of the bridge burners. And that is a motto so ingrained in me that I accidentally used it instead of first in, first out at work the other day in relation to some system that we're using.
Okay.
Someone said, do you mean first in, first out?
if you've got a good boss there, if you have a boss is inwardly going, yes, yes, I heard that. It's like
Chapter 21, Part 1. Perrin reined in his horse near the smoke-blackened rubble of the East Watch redoubt. He twisted in his saddle for a last look at Kapustan's battered walls. Jelarken's palace reared tall and dark against the bright blue sky. Streaks of black paint etched the tower like cracks, a symbol of the city's mourning for its lost prince. The next rain would see that paint washed away, leaving no sign. That structure, he had heard, never wore the mortal moment for very long. I am so curious as to what materials were used in the construction of this edifice. I really love the mystery surrounding it.
Oh, absolutely. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't believe there's ever, after we leave here, other than in reference, I don't think we ever come back to Kapistan. I know we go back to Darujistan.
Yeah, I don't think this particular building is ever addressed directly, but we may gain some insight into a culture that might have had some influence on this or built it.
True.
It's just a suspicion, though. I don't have confirmation of that.
Right.
The bridge burners were filing out through the east gate. Perrin thought, first in, last out. They're always mindful of such gestures. Anstey was in the lead, with Picker a step behind. The two looked to be arguing, which was nothing new. Behind them, the soldiers of the other 7 squads had lost all cohesion. The company marched in no particular order. Perrin wondered at that. He'd met the other sergeants and corporals, of course. He knew the names of every surviving bridge burner, and knew their faces as well. Nonetheless, there was something strangely ephemeral about them. His eyes narrowed as he watched them walk the road, veiled in dust, like figures in a sun-bleached, threadbare tapestry. The march of armies, he reflected, was timeless. And I do love that image of the soldiers marching in the dust like that.
Yeah, and it really, in agreement with Perrin there, it is a timeless image. And, I can even go to more modern ones, which, I grew up watching a lot of the World War II kind of footage stuff. So we've seen our armies marching in the dust.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not an image that's hard to conjure up by any means.
Right.
Modern or old, the soldier is still the same, essentially.
Anytime there's actual walking involved.
Yeah,
I agree. Also, Anstey and Picker arguing is classic. They're like siblings cooped up in a small space too long with no alone time.
Do I sense a little rawness from your New Mexico trip, brother? or is that worn out now?
I will say that when I was writing these notes, that was fresh in my memory. And the West Texas drive is an absolute beast.
Yes, it is.
That did not help.
You needed children like me, dude. I'm sorry. I was the guy that road tripped, stick a book in my hand. 5 minutes in, if I wasn't driving, I'm sleeping. I'm waking up when we're getting there. It's like, all right. It's like, we still called it taking the short way there, as my mother still calls it there. You taking the short way there? It's like, absolutely.
Yeah. Horse hooves sounded to his right, and Perrin swung to see Silver Fox ride up to halt at his side. Perrin said, "Better we'd stayed avoiding each other," returning his gaze to the soldiers on the road below. After a moment, Silver Fox said, "I'd not disagree, but something's happened." Perrin said, "I know." Silver Fox said, "No, you don't. What you no doubt refer to is not what I'm talking about, Captain. It's my mother. She's gone missing. Her and those 2 Daru who were caring for her. Somewhere in the city they turned their wagon, left the line. No one seems to have seen a thing, though of course I cannot question an entire army." Perrin said, "What of your Talani mess? Could they not find them easily enough?" She frowned, but said nothing. Perrin glanced at her and said, "They're not happy with you, are they?" Silver Fox said, "That is not the problem. I have sent them and the Talan A across the river." Perrin said, "We've reliable means of reconnoitering already, Silver Fox." Silver Fox said, "Enough! I do not need to explain myself." Please give me the strength to make it through this conversation without another Silver Fox digression.
Amen.
All right. We're going to try. We're going to try.
I'll put it like this. Each interaction with Silver Fox is the countdown to our last interaction with Silver Fox.
That's very well said, sir. You are such an optimist. Look at you, looking at the bright side of things.
No, it's in my nature, sir.
Perrin said, "Yet you're asking for my help." Silver Fox interrupted. "No, I am asking if you knew anything about it. Those Daru had to have had assistance." Perrin asked, "Have you questioned Krupp?" Silver Fox said, "He is as startled and dismayed as I am, and I believe him." Perrin said, "Well, people have a habit of underestimating Call. He's quite capable of pulling this off all on his own." Silver Fox said, "You do not seem to realize the severity of what they've done in kidnapping my mother." Perrin said, "Hold on, Silver Fox. You left your mother to their care." "Left? No, too calm a word. Abandoned her. And I have no doubt at all that Call and Murillo took the charge seriously, with all the compassion for the Maib you do not seem to possess. Consider the situation from their point of view. They're taking care of her, day in and day out, watching her wither. They see the Maib's daughter, but only from a distance, ignoring her own mother. They decide that they have to find someone who is prepared to help the Maib, or at the very least grant her a dignified end. Kidnapping is taking someone away from someone else. The Maib has been taken away, but from whom? No one. No one at all." He's really cooking there.
Yeah,
He's laid it all out for her.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, it's about time.
Yes.
Silver Fox, her face pale, was slow to respond. When she did, it was in a rasp. "You have no idea what lies between us, Gano is. Perrin said, and it seems you've no idea how to forgive. Not her, not yourself. Guilt has become a chasm. Silver Fox said, that is rich indeed, coming from you. His smile was tight. He said, I've done my climb down, Silver Fox, and am now climbing up the other side. Things have changed for both of us. Silver Fox said, so you have turned your back on your avowed feelings for me. Perrin said, I love you still, but with your death I succumbed to a kind of infatuation. I convinced myself that what you and I had, so very briefly, was of far vaster and deeper import than it truly was. Of all the weapons we turn upon ourselves, guilt is the sharpest, Silver Fox. It can carve one's own past into unrecognizable shapes, false memories leading to beliefs that sow all kinds of obsessions. I really love that quote. It's one that resonated with me, and I highlighted it on a previous read-through. I think it does an excellent job of putting words to our tendency to dwell on the past and the effects that behavior has on us.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because I too have this highlighted. If I'm not mistaken, I think I have it highlighted from my very first read through. I always I think it's really just the same reason you listen. We chew ourselves up, and also we do the thing that he talks about here, this love for her that he had, that only grew over time of this, while he's just kind of hanging out here with nothing better to do with the boys. It was there for that one night, but it's never really been there since.
Yeah.
For that time together, I guess. So it's just something that grew in his mind, and I like that he's kind of come to that. But yeah, that's a really great quote.
Silver Fox said, delighted to have you clear the air so, Gano is. Has it not occurred to you that clinical examination of oneself is yet another obsession? What you dissect has to be dead first. That's the principle of dissection, after all. Perrin said, so my tutor explained all those years ago. But you miss a more subtle truth. I can examine myself, my every feeling, until the abyss swallows the world, yet come no closer to mastery of those emotions within me. For they are not static things, nor are they immune to the outside world, to what others say or don't say, and so they are in constant flux. Silver Fox murmured, extraordinary, Captain Gano's Perrin, the young master of self-control, the tyrant unto himself. You have indeed changed, so much so that I no longer recognize you. He studied her face, searching for a hint of the feelings behind those words, but she had closed herself to him. He slowly said, whereas I find you all too recognizable. Silver Fox said, would you call that ironic? You see me as a woman you once loved, while I see you as a man I never knew. That's a heavy sentence right there.
It kind of is, but it would have been heavier if Gano S. hadn't just a minute ago said what he said about, obviously this is all in my mind, is essentially what he said. And it's like, it's like basically I just woke up here, and it's like, yeah, that would have been heavy a few minutes ago, but now it's like, whatever. Because he's made his peace with it, and I feel like she's tried to use that as a weapon there. And to me, it falls flat. I love that she tries to lay it in there, but I feel that it kind of like, whatever.
I guess it was more, if you take the words in a vacuum, it's like a breakup sentence.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's like, but it's the breakup sentence if he hadn't subtly done it just about 30 seconds ago. It's like he beat her.
She's trying to reverse freak out him.
Yeah.
Okay. Perrin said, too many tangled threads for irony, Silver Fox. Silver Fox said, perhaps pathos, then.
See, she seems a little more hurt by this than he was.
You're right in that he's already moved on, and he's processed this. I honestly don't know what's going on inside of her, because she's so nasty outwardly to so many people. It's hard to see any redeeming qualities that could still be in there because we're just not seeing it.
Exactly, because if she would just share with the class, we'd know what's going on. Maybe she's got her reasons for playing it close to the vest. I mean, we know Whiskey Jack and Dujack tend to play things pretty tight a lot of times, and it hurts the people under their feelings, and so does, but sometimes it's just like, okay, move along.
Mm-hmm. He looked away, then said, we've wandered far from the subject. I'm afraid I can tell you nothing of your mother's fate, yet I am confident, nonetheless, that Call and Murillo will do all they can for her. Silver Fox said, then you're an even bigger fool than they are, Gano is. By stealing her, they have sealed her doom. Perrin said, I didn't know you for the melodramatic type. Silver Fox said, I am not. Perrin interrupted, she's an old woman, an old dying woman. Abyss take me, leave her alone. Silver Fox hissed, you are not listening! My mother is trapped in a nightmare, within her own mind, lost, terrified, hunted. I have stayed closer to her than any of you realized, far closer. Perrin quietly said, Silver Fox, if she is within a nightmare, then her living has become a curse. The only true mercy is to see it ended, once and for all. Silver Fox exclaimed, no! She is my mother, damn you, and I will not abandon her. She wheeled her horse, drove her heels into its flanks. Perrin watched her ride off. He thought, Silver Fox, what machinations have you wrapped around your mother? What is it you seek for her? Would you not tell us, please, so that we are made to understand that what we all see as betrayal is in fact something else? Is it something else? And these machinations, whose? Not Tattersail, surely. No, this must be Nightchill. Oh, how you've closed yourself to me now. When once you reached out, incessantly, relentlessly seeking to pry open my heart, it seems that what we shared so long ago in Pale is as nothing. I begin to think now that it was far more important to me than it was to you. Tattersail, you were, after all, an older woman. You'd lived your shares of loves and losses. On the other hand, I'd barely lived at all. What was, then, is no more. Flesh and blood Bonecaster, you've become colder than the Talanai mass you now command. I suppose, then, they have indeed found a worthy master. Beru fend us all. I feel a sense of relief that this conversation has taken place now.
Agreed.
And he finally came around to the idea that that relationship, if you want to call it that, was more important to him than it was to Tattersail. And this is something that I had mentioned. It was either at the end of Gardens of the Moon or early in this book, where I thought that there was an unequal investment emotionally from them because of the exact reason he listed here. He was like 20-something. She's like 200.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's been around the block a couple times, probably had several long relationships with people, while he probably didn't have any relationship with anybody.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly with all that. If there was something from Tattersail, because there could have been, but the fact that there are now 3 other souls residing in there with her, they're learning how to work together, not how to deal with outside forces. Maybe that's part of what's going on with her. I don't know if we'll ever know that.
Yeah, and I also think that this realization has provided him with much needed closure and the ability to move forward without being weighed down by the past and this quote-unquote relationship with Silver Fox. I mean, he may have already processed the issue, but
right.
Having the conversation, I think, is a really good final nail in the coffin.
It is. You know what? It also, maybe it'll help us let it go, too.
Yeah, and then final thing on this point, Silver Fox is doing no one any favors here by playing her cards so close to her chest regarding whatever she is or isn't doing in relation to the Maib. Simple communication would go a long way in lowering the temperature in this situation.
Yes.
No one is going to be sympathetic to her if all they see is her appearing to have abandoned her mother.
Amen to everything that you just said, because she may have really good reasons for what she's doing, but I'm not sure if we'll ever, I'm not sure if we'll ever know. And again, I guess this is kind of, in some sense, Mr. Erikson's work does this to you sometime, but it's also, that is just how it is in life sometimes. I talk about the fact that some things are just never sussed out, never anything. Some things don't need to be sussed out. And it's like, so, I'm just going to have to just learn to live with this.
Mm-hmm. Of the 30 transport barges and floating bridges the Panyans had used to cross the Catlin River, only a third remained serviceable, the others having fallen prey to the overzealous white-faced Barghast during the first day of battle. Companies from Caladan Brood's collection of mercenaries had begun efforts at salvaging the wrecks with the intention of cobbling together a few more, while a lone serviceable floating bridge and the 10 surviving barges already rode the lines across the river's expanse, loaded with troops, mounts, and supplies. Akovian watched them as he walked the shoreline. He'd left his horse on a nearby hillock and now wandered alone. Glancing up, he saw a figure on the beach ahead, seated cross-legged and facing the scene of the crossing. Wild-haired, wearing a stained collection of rags, the man was busy painting on a wood-backed muslin. Akovian paused, watching the artist's head bob up and down, the long-handled brush darting about in his hand, now hearing his mumbling conversation with himself. Or perhaps not with himself. One of the skull-sized boulders near the artist moved suddenly, revealing itself to be a large, olive-green toad, and it had just replied to the artist's tirade in a low, rumbling voice. Akovian approached. The toad saw him first and said something in a language Akovian did not understand. The artist looked up, scowled. In Daru he snapped, "Interruptions are not welcome!" Akovian said, "My apologies, sir." The man interrupted, "Wait! You're the one named Akovian, defender of Kapustan." Akovian said, "Failed defend." The man again interrupted. Yes, everyone's heard your words from the parley. Idiocy. When I paint you in the scene, I'll be sure to include the noble failure. In your stance, perhaps. In where your eyes rest, maybe. A certain twist to the shoulders. Yes, I think I see it now. Precisely. Excellent." Akovian asked, "You are Malazan?" The man said, "Of course I'm Malazan. Does Brood give one whit for history? He does not. But the old emperor, oh yes, he did indeed. Artists with every army, on every campaign, artists of purest talent, sharp-eyed, yes, dare I admit it, geniuses, such as Ormu Logun of Li Heng." I had honestly forgot that this guy was introduced this early in the books.
I know. I'm going to go back to when Itkovian goes, "My apologies, sir." Who is he apologizing to? The toad? Or the artist?
Yeah.
You know, I'm curious about that. Because Itkovian is so formal, and I love Itkovian. But I, too, am like, I forgot that we'd introduced this guy so early. And the minute that he's described him, I just knew the guy's name. Like I said, Ormalugan.
You've always remembered this guy's name.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I forget it. It's a hard one.
I think that's why I remember names. Hard names just are like, oh yeah, there's some really weird names, and I guess it just comes from, I don't know why I like names. I just have always liked names, and that just stood out for me, and I've always remembered it for some stupid reason.
Also, does this guy sound just like Puss to you?
Yeah, he does. I'm wondering if there's any shadow going on, or if it's just the diet.
Yeah, let's get to that.
Yeah.
Akovian said, "I'm afraid I've not heard that name. He was a great artist of the Malazan Empire?" Ormulugan said, "Is. I am Ormolugan of Li Heng, of course. Endlessly mimicked, never surpassed. Ormulogan Suraith Gumbel." Akovian said, "An impressive title." Ormulogan interrupted, "It's not a title, you fool. Gumbel is my critic." With that he gestured at the toad, then said to it, "Mark him well, Gumbel, so that you note the brilliance of my coming rendition. He stands straight, does he not? Yet his bones may well be iron. Their burden that of 100,000 foundation stones, or souls, to be more precise. And his features, yes? Look carefully, Gumbel, and you will see the fullest measure of this man. And know this, though I capture all he is on the canvas recording the parley outside Kapustan, know this, in that image, you will see that Akovian is not yet done." Akovian started. Ormulogan grinned and said, "Oh yes, warrior, I see all too well for your comfort, yes? Now, Gumbel, spew forth your commentary, for I know its tide is building. Come now." Gumbel laconically said, "You are mad. Forgive him, Shield Anvil. He softens his paint in his own mouth. It has poisoned his brain." So that's related to your comment about his diet. Right. It's having some effect on him. I just like to take a moment and recognize that we are just simply accepting the fact that a talking toad the size of a skull has just appeared and it's totally normal. Like, not a shock at all.
Let's talk about that. In a world of flying cities, dragons living in undead, people living in dead, and the dead ones can't seem to stop complaining, dogs the size of mules, a rough assemblage of deities and demigods hanging out about a click or two down the road, I guess a talking frog is not that big of a deal.
It seems out of place to me just from the perspective, you don't see a lot of talking animals, like talking horses. Sure. If we have seen anything even close to that, it's a soul taken that is using telepathy to transmit their voice.
Yes, you're right.
I think that's what's jarring about it. I don't even know that's jarring. I accepted it. It is what it is, right? You have all these reasons listed of why this is not that far out of the realm. It's just unique in that it's an animal that seems to be talking.
It's not just talking, it's his critic.
Yeah. It has intelligence.
It's like, is this a curse? Or, was he human at one point? Are frogs on this planet critics by nature? Which is not cool if they are. Could you imagine that? It's like everywhere you go, it's like, oh, here comes somebody. Look at this big fella coming up. It's like, these guys would be talking trash everywhere if they were.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, though, is Ormulugan has some kind of sight, wouldn't you say?
Some kind of sight?
Like insight?
It does seem to be preternaturally accurate.
Yeah. And so maybe he is in touch with the shadow world a little bit. Because those guys tend to be the artistic types. Sorry, I was speaking like one of those types. Yeah, a little eccentric.
Ormulogan said, "Poisoned, pickled, poached. Yes, I've heard every variation from you until I'm sick to my stomach." Gumbel gave a sleepy blink and said, "Nausea is to be expected. Shield Anvil, I am no critic. Merely a humble observer who, when able, speaks on behalf of the tongue-tied multitudes otherwise known as the commonalty, or, more precisely, the rabble. An audience, understand, wholly incapable of self-realization or cogent articulation, and thus possessors of depressingly vulgar tastes when not apprised of what they truly like. If only they knew it. My meager gift, therefore, lies in the communication of an aesthetic framework upon which most artists hang themselves. Ormulogan exclaimed, "Ha! Slimy one, ha! So very slimy. Here, have a fly." Ormulogan plunged his paint-smeared fingers into a pouch at his side. He withdrew a deer fly and tossed it at the toad. The still living but de-winged insect landed directly in front of Gumble, who lunged forward and devoured it in a pink flash. Gumble said, "As I was saying." Ikovian interrupted, "A moment, if you please." Gumble said, "I will allow a moment if possessing admirable brevity." Ikovian said, "Thank you, sir." Oh, sir. Ormulogan, you say it was the practice of the Emperor of Malaz to assign artists to his armies, presumably to record historical moments. Yet is not One-Arm's host outlawed? For whom, then, do you paint? Ormulogan said, "A record of the outlawry is essential. Besides, I had little choice but to accompany the army. What would you have me do, paint sunsets on cobbles in Darujistan for a living? I found myself on the wrong continent. As for the so-called community of artisans and patrons in the so-called city of Pale and their so-called styles of expression," Gumble cut in, "they hated you." Ormulogan said, "And I hated them. Tell me, did you see anything worthy of mention in Pale? Did you?" Gumble said, "Well, there was that one mosaic." Ormulogan said, "What?" Gumble said, "Fortunately, the attributed artist was long dead, permitting my effusiveness in his praise." Ormulogan said, "You call that effusive? It shows promise. Isn't that what you said? You well know it's precisely what you said, as soon as that foppish host mentioned the artist was dead." Ikovian said, "Actually rather droll to say such a thing." Gumble said, "I am never droll." Ormulogan said, "Though you do drool on occasion." "Ha, slimy one, yes? Ha!" Gumble said, "Suck another lump of paint, will you? There, that quicksilvered white. Looks very tasty." Ormulogan muttered, "You just want me dead," reaching for the small gummy piece of paint. He said, "So you can get effusive." Gumble said, "If you say so." Ormulogan said, "You're a leech, you know that? Following me around everywhere. A vulture." Gumble sighed and said, "Dear man, I am a toad, while you are an artist. And for my fortune in the distinction, I daily thank every god that is and every god that ever was." Ikovian left them exchanging ever more elaborate insults and continued on down the shoreline. He forgot to look at Ormulogan's canvas. After all that, he didn't even look at the painting?
Oh, but the way those guys are going at it, I don't see how you'd have time to pay any attention. These guys, it was as it was escalating between those two. It's like, it's because the toad is the toad is vicious, man. It's like,
yeah, he's just trying to dodge it.
That got mean. It's like,
Ormulogan must be mad to sit there and bicker with a toad, though. I swear, they're just like Pust and Magora.
Exactly. You know, that's what makes me wonder. I'm like you. There's something really because he says. That brings up the question, does the toad follow him around? It's a toad. How can it follow a moving army? Wouldn't it have to be toted by the army? So does he carry the toad with him? He has to carry it with him.
Like,
absolutely.
I don't see another way of that working.
Yeah, because no one wants to talk to this guy. I'm curious about that. Did some wizard be like, "Oh my gosh, if I have to listen to another of this guy's, okay, I'm done." He goes, "I just made a toad critic just to cover his space." Or something. I don't know. It's like, I'm curious about that.
Yeah. Once the armies were across the river, they would divide. The city of Lest lay directly south, 4 days' march, while the road to Seta angled west-southwest. Seta was at the very feet of the Vision Mountains, rising on the banks of the river from which it took its name. That same river continued on to the sea south of Lest, and would need to be crossed by both forces, eventually. Ikovian would accompany the army that struck for Lest, which consisted of the Grey Swords, elements of Tistandi, the Revi, Ilgris Bargast, a regiment of cavalry from Saltoan, and a handful of lesser mercenary companies from North Genebakis. Caladan Brood remained in overall command, with Kalor and Korlat as his seconds. The Grey Swords were attached in the manner of an allied force, with the Shield Anvil considered Brood's equal. This distinction did not apply to the other mercenary companies, for they were one and all contracted to the warlord. Gruntle and his motley followers were being viewed as wholly independent, welcome at the briefings but free to do as they pleased. All in all, Ikovian concluded, the organization of the command was confused, the hierarchies of rank ephemeral. He thought, not unlike our circumstances in Kapustan, with the prince and the mass council ever muddying the waters. Perhaps this is a characteristic of the North and its independent city-states, before the Malazan invasion forced them into a confederacy of sorts, that is. And even then, it seemed, old rivalries and feuds perennially undermined the unification to the invaders' advantage. The structure imposed by the Malazan High Fist upon those forces accompanying him was far clearer in its hierarchy. The imperial way was instantly recognizable to Ikovian, and indeed was similar to what he would have established were he in Dujek One-Arm's place. The High Fist commanded. His seconds were Whiskey Jack and Humbrol Tar, the latter displaying his wisdom by insisting upon Dujek's preeminence, as well as the commander of the Black Maranth, whom Ikovian had yet to meet. These three were considered equal in rank, yet distinct in their responsibilities. Ikovian heard horse hooves and turned to see the Malazan second, Whiskey Jack, riding towards him along the strand. That he had paused to speak with the artist was evident in Ormulogan's hastily gathering up his supplies in the soldier's wake. Whiskey Jack reined in and said, "Good day to you, Ikovian." Ikovian said, "And to you, sir. Is there something you wish of me?" Whiskey Jack shrugged, scanning the area. He said, "I'm looking for Silver Fox, her or the two Marines who are supposed to be accompanying her." Ikovian said, "Following her, you no doubt mean. They passed me earlier, first Silver Fox, then the two soldiers, riding east." Whiskey Jack asked, "Did any of them speak with you?" Ikovian said, "No, they rode at some distance from me, so courtesies were not expected, nor did I endeavor to hail them." Whiskey Jack grimaced. Ikovian asked, "Is something wrong, sir?" Whiskey Jack said, "Quick Ben's been using his warrants to assist in the crossing. Our forces are on the other side and are ready to march, since we've the longer road." Ikovian said, "Indeed. Is Silver Fox not of the Reeve, however, or do you simply wish to make formal your goodbye?" Whiskey Jack's frown deepened. He said, "She's as much Malazan as Reeve. I would ask her to choose whom to accompany." Ikovian said, "Perhaps she has, sir." Whiskey Jack said, "Maybe not," eyes now fixed on something to the east. Ikovian turned, but since he was on foot, it was a moment longer before the two riders came into his line of sight. The Marines approaching at a steady canter. They drew up before their commander. Whiskey Jack asked, "Where is she?" The Marine on the right shrugged and said, "We followed her to the coast. Above the tide line was a row of lumpy hills surrounded by swampy ditches. She rode into one of the hills." Whiskey Jack. The other Marine jumped in. "Rode into the side of one of them. Vanished. Not a pause nor a stumble from her horse. We rode up to the spot, but there was nothing there but grass, mud, and rocks. We've lost her, which is, I guess, what she wanted." Whiskey Jack was silent. Ikovian had expected a heartfelt curse at the very least, and was impressed at the man's self-control. Whiskey Jack said, "All right, ride back with me. We're crossing to the other side." One of the Marines said, "We saw Gumble's pet on the way out." Whiskey Jack said, "I've already sent him and Ormulogan back. Theirs is the last wagon, and you well know Ormulogan's instructions regarding his collection." The Marines nodded. I love how the duo are referred to as Gumble and his pet by these Marines. Right. That's crazy.
Oh my word, that is absolutely amazing. And I love how he's like, and don't even talk to that boy, just, you know what he's doing.
Ikovian asked, "His collection? How many scenes has he painted since Pale?" One of the Marines grinned and said, "Since Pale? There's over 800 stretches in that wagon. 10, 11 years worth. Dujek here, Dujek there, Dujek even where he wasn't but should have been. He's already done one of the siege of Kapustan, with Dujek arriving in the nick of time, tall in his saddle and coming through the gate. There's one white-faced Barghast crouching in the gate's shadow, looting a dead Panyan. And in the storm clouds over the scene, you'll make out Lassine's face if you look carefully enough." Whiskey Jack growled, "Enough. Your words give offense, soldier. The man before you is Ikovian." The Marine's grin broadened, but she said nothing. The other Marine said, "We know that, sir, which is why my comrade here was teasing him. Ikovian, there's no such painting. Ormulogan is the host's historian, since we ain't got any other, and he's charged on pain of death to keep things accurate, right down to the nose hairs." Whiskey Jack told them, "Ride. I would a private word with Ikovian." One of the Marines said, "Aye, sir." The two Marines departed. I really love these two, and Whiskey Jack's response to them sounds like a tired parent.
Very much so, but I love his relationship with all the people under him, though, anyhow. It's just fantastic.
I felt that enough.
Yes, right?
That hit me.
Yeah.
Whiskey Jack said, "Apologies, Ikovian." Ikovian said, "No need, sir. There is welcome relief to such irreverence. In fact, it pleases me that they would display such comfort." Whiskey Jack said, "Well, they're only like that with people they respect, though it's often taken as the opposite, which can lead to all sorts of trouble." Ikovian said, "So I would imagine." Whiskey Jack gruffly said, "Well," then surprised Ikovian by dismounting, stepping up to him and holding out his gauntleted hand. He said, "Among the soldiers of the Empire, where the worn gauntlet is for war and nothing other than war, to remain gauntleted when grasping the hand of another in peace is the rarest of gestures." Ikovian said, "So it, too, is often misunderstood. I, sir, do not miscomprehend the significance, and so am honored." He grasped Whiskey Jack's hand and said, "You accord me far too much." Whiskey Jack cut in, I do not, Ikovian. I only wish you were traveling with us, so that I could come to know you better. Ikovian said, Yet we will meet at Marik, sir. Whiskey Jack nodded and said, Until then, Ikovian. They released their grips. Whiskey Jack swung himself back into the saddle and gathered the reins. He hesitated and said, Are all Ellen like you, Ikovian? Ikovian shrugged and said, I am not unique. Whiskey Jack said, Then wear the Empress the day her legions assail your homeland's borders. Ikovian's brows rose. He said, And come that day, will you be commanding those legions? Whiskey Jack grinned and said, Go well, sir. Ikovian watched the man ride away, down the strand, his horse's hooves kicking up green clumps of sand. He had a sudden inexplicable conviction that they would never see each other again. After a moment, he shook his head to dispel the dread thought. I don't like the sound of that.
Agreed. Very disturbing.
Elsewhere, Krupp exclaimed, Well, of course Krupp will bless this company with his presence. Quickben sighed and said, You misunderstood. That was only a question, not an invitation. I love how Quickben wants to have nothing to do with Krupp and doesn't dance around the issue. He has had it up to here with him, and he's always so short with him. It's beautiful.
It is, because he knows there's something up, and I don't think he can suss it out. He can't figure it out, and it irritates him.
Yeah, also, Krupp's speech patterns. I'm sure has something to do with it too, right?
Yeah, he would drive me nuts, and I'm assuming the way his speech patterns would drive anyone nuts. The Yoda speech can only go for so long, man.
Krupp said, Poor wizard is weary, yes? So many paths of sorcery to take the place of mundane barges plagued with leaky lack of integrity. Nonetheless, Krupp is impressed with your prowess. Such a dance of warrens rarely if ever before witnessed by humble self, and each one pristine, as if to say faugh to the foolish one in chains. Such a bold challenge, such a... Quickben cut in, Oh, be quiet, please. He stood on the river's north shore. Mud covered his leggings to mid-thigh, the price for minimizing as much as possible the distance of the paths he had fashioned for the columns of troops, the wagons, the livestock, and the spare mounts. He only awaited the last few stragglers who'd yet to arrive, Whiskey Jack included. To make his exhaustion even more unpleasant, the spirit of Talamandus whined unceasing complaint from his invisible perch on the wizard's left shoulder. Too much power had been unveiled here, sufficient to draw notice. Careless, claimed the stick snare in a whisper. Suicidal, in fact. Talamandus said, The crippled god cannot help but find us. Stupid bluster. And what of the Panyan Seer? A score of dread warrens all trembling to our passage. Proof of our singular efficacy against the infection. Will either of them simply sit back and do nothing in answer to what they have seen here? Quickben muttered, Silence. Krupp's wiry brows rose. He said, One rude command was sufficient, Krupp haughtily assures miserable wizard. Poor Quickben. He's stuck between these two, and he's having to tightrope walk the conversation with Talamandus.
Both of these guys, I know, they're both whining in his ear, one way or the other.
It seems like Krupp is fishing here.
He is an expert fisherman, is he not?
Yeah, he wears people down to the point where they just give up in many cases.
Yes, they do. It's like, fine.
Quickben said, Not you. Never mind. I was thinking aloud. Krupp said, Curious habit for a mage, yes? Dangerous. Quickben said, You think so? How about some more loudly uttered thoughts, Daru? The display is deliberate. The unveiling of power here is precisely intended to kick the hornet nests. Both of them, clumsily massive, an appalling absence of subtlety. Thunder to those who had been expecting the almost soundless padding of a mouse's feet and its whispering tail. Now, why would I do that, do you wonder? Krupp said, Krupp does not wonder at all, except perhaps at your insisting on explaining such admirable tactics of misdirection to these squalling seagulls. Quickben scowled down at Krupp and said, Really? I had no idea I was that obvious. Maybe I should reconsider. Krupp said, Nonsense, wizard. Hold to your unassailable self-confidence, aye. Some might well call it megalomania, but not Krupp, for he too is in possession of unassailable self-confidence, such as only mortals are capable of, and then rightfully but a mere handful the world over. You've singular company, Krupp assures you. Quickben grinned. He asked, Singular? And what about these seagulls? Krupp waved a plump hand and said, Pah! Lest one should land on your left shoulder, that is. Which would be another matter entirely, would it not? Quickben's dark eyes thinned suspiciously on Krupp at his side. And that's an interesting statement. What a slick way of telling Quickben he knows about Talamandus.
Yeah, that's what would be my assumption.
Krupp blithely continued, In which case poor ignorant bird would be witness to such potent plurality of cunning converse so as to reel confused, if not mercifully constipated. Quickben blinked in startlement. He asked, What did you say? Krupp said, Well, sir, were we not suggesting the placement of corks? Be quiet. Shut up. Krupp simply advised of an internal version with which Seagull's ceaseless bleeding complaint is silenced. Indeed, stoppered up to the relief of one and all. 200 paces to the right, another barge loaded with Brood's forces set out, the craft quickly drawing the lines down current as it left the shore. A pair of Marines rode up to Quickben and Krupp. Quickben scowled at them and asked, "Where's Whiskey Jack?" One of the Marines said, "On the way, bridge burner." "Did the Toad and his artist show up?" Quickben said, "Just in time to take charge of their wagon, aye. They're on the other side." One of the Marines said, "Fancy work. We crossing the same way?" Quickben said, "Well, I was thinking of dropping you halfway. When did you two last bathe?" The women exchanged a glance. Then one shrugged and said, "Don't know. A month? 3? We've been busy." The other Marine said, "And we'd rather not get wet, wizard. Our armor and the clothes under 'em might fall apart." Krupp said, "Krupp asserts that would prove a sight never to be forgotten." One of the Marines said, "Bet your eyes would fall out, and if they didn't, we'd have to help 'em along some." The other said, "At least our nails would be clean." Krupp said, "Aye, coarse women. Krupp sought only to compliment." One of the Marines said, "You're the one needing a bath."
Gosh.
Krupp's expression displayed shock, then dismay. He said, "Outrageous notion. Sufficient layers of sweet scent applied over sufficient years, nay, decades, have resulted in a permanent and indeed impervious bouquet of gentlest fragrance." He waved his plump, pale hands and continued, "A veritable aura about oneself to draw love-struck butterflies." One of the Marines cut in, "Look like deer flies to me." Krupp said, "These are uncivil lands. Yet do you see a single insect alight?" The Marine said, "Well, there's a few drowned in your oily hair, now that you ask." Krupp said, "Precisely. Inimical foes, one and all, fall to the same fate." Quickben said, "Ah, here comes Whiskey Jack. Finally, thank the gods." It just kept getting worse for him.
Oh, it does. I love how the two Marines can just continually goad Krupp. They're experts, for some reason, at confounding this man.
Oh, yeah, it's great. I'd forgotten about that last conversation where they really... they really got him good.
Oh, it is too funny, dude.
That was the sweet cakes in that conversation. The Nathy syrup cake, I believe.
Oh, yes. They were the ones that brought up the sweet cakes that we talked about the mod irregulars were throwing at them, weren't they?
Yes, they told the story.
They had all the twigs and stuff in them.
Uh-huh. Darkness swallowed the alley as dusk descended on the ruined city. A few oil lamps lit the major thoroughfares, and the occasional squad of Gidrath walked rounds carrying lanterns of their own. Wrapped in a cloak hiding his full armor, Cole stood within an alcove and watched one such squad troop past at the alley's mouth, watched as the pool of yellow light slowly dwindled until the night once more reclaimed the street. He stepped out and gestured. Murillo flicked the traces, startling the oxen into motion. The wagon creaked and rocked over the cracked, heat-blasted cobbles. Cole strode in advance out onto the street. It had been only partially cleared of rubble. 3 gutted temples were within the range of his vision, showing no indication of having been reoccupied. No different from the 4 others they had found earlier that afternoon. At the moment, the prospects were grim. It seemed the only surviving priests were those in the thrall, and that was the last place they wanted to visit. Rumor was political rivalries had reached a volatile state, now that the mass council was free of the presence of powerful allies, free as well of a royal presence who traditionally proved a leveling influence on their excesses. The future of Kapustan was not a promising one. Call turned to the right, northeast, waving behind him as he made his way up the street. He heard Murillo's muted cursing as he slapped the traces down onto the backs of the 2 oxen. The animals were tired and hungry, the wagon behind them overburdened. Call thought, "Hood take us. We might have made a terrible mistake." He heard the flap of a bird's wings overhead, soft and momentary, and thought nothing of it. Deep ruts had been worn into the cobbles from the passage of countless wagons, many of them of late heavily loaded down with broken stone, but their width did not match that of the Reeve wagon, a thick-wheeled, plains vehicle built to contest high grasses and muddy sinkholes. Nor could Murillo manage to avoid the wagons slipping into one of the ruts, for the oxen had a grooved path of their own on this side of the street. The result was a sharply canted, awkward progress. The yokes shifted into angles that were clearly uncomfortable for the oxen. That sounds like a nightmare trying to navigate that with that wagon.
Oh, my word. I have no idea what that would be like. That's just absolutely terrible. I've watched too many Westerns. This has that vibe, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, we got to cross this river. We got to cross this ditch. Wheels stuck in the rut. It's like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Get your paw out of here. Mixing my genres. I apologize.
Behind him, Call heard one low complaint, which ended with a strange grunt and whip of the traces. He spun in time to see Murillo's body pitching from the seat to strike the cobbles with a bone-cracking impact. A huge figure, all in black, who seemed for the briefest moment to be winged, now stood atop the wagon. Murillo lay in a motionless heap beside the front wheel. Fear ripped through Call. He said, "What the?" The figure gestured. Black sorcery bloomed from him, swept tumbling towards Call. Swearing, the Daru flung himself to the right, rolled clanking, metal snapping on the stone, to collide with the first half-moon step of a temple. But the magic flowed too wide to escape, swirling and spinning its inky power to fill the street like a flash flood. And I thought that was an interesting description of the way the magic spread into the street.
Oh, it is. It's very easy to see and understand that kind of description, too. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's almost like liquid nitrogen, the way that the cloud disperses as it's spreading when you pour it out.
Yeah, that's cool.
Lying on his side, back jammed against the step, Call could only throw up a forearm to cover his eyes as the sorcery loomed over him, then plunged down, and vanished. Blinking, Call grunted, dropped his arm in time to see a dark, armored figure step directly over him from behind, from the direction of the temple's entrance. His peripheral vision caught flanking longswords, one of them strangely bent, gliding past as the massive warrior reached the cobbles of the street. The attacker perched on the wagon spoke in a high voice, the tone bemused. "You should be dead. I can feel the coldness of you. I can sense the fist of Hood, coiled there in your lifeless chest. He's kept you here, wandering." Call thought, this new arrival doesn't look very dead to me. His eyes scanned the shadows to the right of the wagon, seeking Murillo's motionless form. The warrior rasped, "Not wandering," still striding towards the figure. He said, "Hunting." The attacker said, "Us? But we've taken so few from you. Less than a score in this city. Knight of Death, has your master not fed unto bursting of late? And I but sought the unconscious hag. She lies in the bed of this wagon, hovering at the very edge of the chasm. Surely your master," the Knight of Death rumbled, "not for you." The air in the alley had grown bitter cold. The attacker sighed and said, "Oh, all right then. What of this driver and his guard? I could use so many pieces of them." The Knight of Death said, "No. Korbal Broach, hear the words of my master. You are to release the undead who guard your compound. You and the one named Bacalane." That's how Erikson actually pronounces it. I've been saying it wrong this whole time.
Oh, okay.
"You and the one named Bacalane are to leave the city this night." Korbal Broach said, "We'd planned on a morning departure, Knight of Death. For you are the knight, yes? High House Death stirs to wakefulness, I now sense. A morning departure, yes? To follow these fascinating armies southward." The Knight of Death said, "This night, or I shall descend upon you, and claim your souls. Do you realize the fate my master has in store for you two?" It sounds like Bacalane and Korbal Broach are in for a bad time when Hood gets his hands on them.
Yes, it does. He does not sound too thrilled that they're stealing souls from him.
There's going to be a price to pay.
Oh, always is, sir.
Call watched as the bald, pallid-faced man atop the wagon raised his arms, which then blurred, broadened into midnight wings. He giggled and said, "You will have to catch us first." The blurring became a smear. Then, where the man had stood, there was only a bedraggled crow, cawing sharply as it rose upward, wings thrumming, and was swallowed by darkness. The warrior walked to where Murillo lay. Call drew a deep breath, seeking to slow his hammering heart, then climbed painfully to his feet. He said, "My thanks to you, sir," then grunted, wincing at what in the morning would be a fierce bruising on his right shoulder and hip. He asked, "Does my companion live?" The warrior, who Call now saw was wearing the remnants of Gidrath armor, swung to face him. He said, "He lives. Korbal Broach requires that they be alive for his work, at least at first. You are to come with me." Call said, "Ah, when you said hunting, that sorcerer assumed it was him you were hunting. But it wasn't, was it?" The Knight of Death said, "They are an arrogant pair." Call slowly nodded. He hesitated, then said, "Forgive me if I am being rude, but I would know what your lord, would do with us. We've an elderly woman to care for." The Knight of Death said, "You are to have my master's protection. Come, the Temple of Hood has been prepared for your residence." Call said, "Not sure how I should take that. The Maib needs help." The Knight of Death said, "What the Maib needs, Call of Darujistan, is not for you to give." Call asked, "Is it for Hood to give?" The Knight of Death said, "The woman's flesh and bone must be maintained, fed, given water, cared for. That is your responsibility." Call said, "You did not answer." The Knight of Death said, "Follow me. We have not far to go." Call quietly said, "At the moment, I am inclined otherwise." He reached for his sword. The Knight of Death cocked his head and said, "Tell me, Call of Darujistan, do you sleep?" Call frowned. He said, "Of course. What?" The Knight of Death interrupted. "I did once too. I must have, yes, but now I do not. Instead, I pace. You see, I cannot remember sleep. I cannot remember what it was like." Call said, I am sorry for that." The Knight of Death said, "Thus, one who does not sleep, and, here in this wagon, one who will not awaken. I believe, Call of Darujistan, that we will have need of each other, soon, this woman and I. Call asked, what kind of need? The Knight of Death said, I do not know. Come, we've not far. Call slowly resheathed his sword. He could not have explained why he did so. None of his questions had been answered to his satisfaction, and the thought of entering Hood's protection chilled his skin. Nonetheless, he nodded and said, a moment, if you will. I have to lift Murillo onto the bed. The Knight of Death said, ah, yes, that is true. I would have done so, but, alas, I find myself unable to release my swords from my own hands. The warrior was silent a moment longer, then he said, Korbal Broach saw into me. His words have made my mind troubled. Call of Darujistan, I think I am dead. Am I? Am I dead? Call said, I don't know, but I think so. The Knight of Death said, the dead, it is said, do not sleep. Caldwell knew the saying, and knew that it had originally come from Hood's own temple. He knew as well the wry observation that closed the quote. He said, while the living do not live. Not that that makes much sense. The Knight of Death said, it does to me, for I now know that I have lost what I did not know I once possessed. Cull's mind stumbled through that statement. Then he sighed and said, I'd be a fool not to take your word for it. Have you a name? The Knight of Death said, I believe so, but I have forgotten it. Cull crouched down over Murillo and gathered the man into his arms and said, well, Knight of Death won't do, I'm afraid. He straightened, grunting at the weight in his arms. He said, you are a Gidrath, yes? And a Capin, though I admit, with that bronze hue to your skin, you've more the coloring of... The Knight of Death said, no, I was not Gidrath, not Capin. I am not, I think, from this continent at all. I do not know why I appeared here, nor how. I have not been here long. This is as my master wills. Of my past, I recall but one thing. Call carried Murillo to the back of the wagon and laid the man down. He asked, and what's that? The Knight of Death said, I once stood within fire. After a long moment, Call sighed roughly. He said, an unfortunate memory. The Knight of Death said, there was pain, yet I held on, fought on, or so I believe. I was, I think, sworn to defend a child's life, but the child was no more. It may be that I failed. Let's take a moment to review these details. Who do we know that is from another continent that stood in fire and was sworn to protect a child, or could be a girl? Bodin.
Yeah, right. Bodin, that's right.
Mm-hmm. And his death would coincide with the timing of his appearance during the siege of Kapustan.
Yes, it would. Yet another point taken, yes.
Mm-hmm. And this is one of those mind-blowing connections that when you see it, it's an aha moment. A little nugget of info that you may simply pass over on a read-through. I love these little details that are sprinkled around.
Yeah, me too. And I remember seem to remember us talking off air a little bit about something about this, because I kind of forward remembered something about this bit here, and but there was something here I'll bring up later too that I was really forgot in something that just happened. That really blew me away. I'll kind of cover this. I'll come back to this in a moment, but it is amazing when these pieces just start clicking together. It's so cool.
I'm not even sure I ever put that together before. I honestly don't remember, because I know we had done some conversation about that. We had looked that up. I believe it was actually when we're going through Deadhouse Gates. We wanted to confirm what happened to him.
Right. And for me, I can't remember what it was. I'm like you. The first time I read this, it is something that is just kind of, I stood in fire. Okay, my skin is this, odd color. Okay, it didn't really land on me either the first time through. And I'm not sure how it landed on me, or if it's revealed, if his name actually comes up at some point in this later on in this chapter, or I can't remember, how it's revealed. But when you see it like this, and we're looking at it like this, you're like, that's Bowden. That's fantastic. And it does. Yeah. It lines up perfectly. It's wild.
Yeah, I love it. Call said, well, we still need a name for you. The Knight of Death said, perhaps one will come to you eventually, Call of Darujistan. Call said, I promise it. The Knight of Death said, or perhaps one day my memories will return in full, and with them my name. Call thought, and if Hood has any mercy in him, that day will never come, friend. For I think there was nothing easy in your life, or in your death. And it seems he does possess mercy, for he's taken you far away from all that you once knew. For if I'm not mistaken, if only by your features, and never mind that strange skin, you're Malazan.
Mm. Dun, dun, dun.
All right, we're going to stop there. We're going to stop there. We'll finish out the chapter next week. For Standout Moments, The image of the bridge burners being the last out of Kapustan, along with Ansy and Picker bickering in the process. Love that.
It's awesome, dude. I love these guys always bickering. I have this timeless image of every soldier that's ever lived marching in the dust, and then there's these two at the back, just fingers pointing at each other, mouths open, smoking cigs if they got them over there,
The quote-unquote breakup conversation between Silver Fox and Perrin. There was some good closure there for Perrin, and it was about time that happened.
Amen and good riddance. Goodbye, Silver Fox. Please let her leave quietly.
The introduction of Ormulogan and Gumble. What a pair! I love how Gumble said Ormulogan's brain is addled from licking his paintbrushes. And it's so funny how Ormulogan is sitting there and bickering with a sentient toad.
And I do love that the sentient toad is actually sentient and not a figment of his imagination. Or maybe it is a figment of his imagination he's brought to life with his magic. With his sight. I don't know. I'm just teasing. I don't know. But I do think I love it because he's obviously real because all of a sudden, just out of nowhere. Is this what you would call retconning? Because all of a sudden, it's just Ormulogan's always been here. The Toad and the artist have always been here. Oh yeah, everyone knows the Toad and the artist. It's like there's no reason they've ever talked about him. Why would we talk about Ormulogan? Everyone knows he's over there. It's an old guy over there with the Toad painting the picture. Have you never noticed him over there before? Get out of here.
It's a big army. Maybe it takes a third party to see it to note it, Like everybody else is probably just used to seeing it, so there's no reason to mention it.
Right. Oh, that's too funny though.
Yeah. The conversation between Whiskey Jack, Ikovian, and Silver Fox's Marine protectors. I really enjoyed that.
Absolutely. Always enjoyed that. Whiskey Jack conversation, a lot of times it's so genuine, especially with him and Ikovian. There is a special bond there that I like that I don't know if we'll ever get a chance to examine deeper, but I like between them two.
Mm-hmm. Quick Ben getting stuck between Talamandus, Krupp, and the Marines that were protecting Silver Fox.
Dude, talk about a bad spot. That's a really bad situation right there, man. That's awful.
He's already tired from all the magics he's been using.
Yeah, right.
Now he's having to defend
his
his
decisions. Put up with
decisions.
these guys on top of it. Yes. Oh.
Finding out that Bodden is the Knight of Death.
Dude, that's a huge dude. That rug tied the room together, man. That's a big one. And I also have this, I completely forgot that they were attacked by Brooch.
Every time we think we've seen the last of those guys,
I keep saying
the last time was when Quick Ben dealt with them. Then Picker lays them out.
Yes, I thought that was it.
And then this.
I thought certainly this is it. I don't know. I don't remember them cropping up, but maybe they pop in for one more comedic outro or something. I'm not sure, but I had forgotten. I love the fact that Bowden / Knight of Death knows facts pertaining to people, like when he looks at him, but he calls him out and says, get out of here. I'm not even looking for you, but get out of here and get your boss, Bacalane, and y'all get out of town tonight. Oh, we'll go tomorrow. No, you're leaving tonight.
Get out of here.
You're leaving tonight, sir. Did you ever see Death Note?
Yes.
You know how they had their personal data stored above their heads? With the gods of death to see. I'm curious if Bodden sees things like that, because he seems to, he called out Brooch for who he was and his boss and said, release the souls, but then he just kind of knows who he's here for, Cole of Dirigistan. And so he probably just knows everyone he looks at, because it's like, okay, I have to know.
He knew the Maib as well.
But it's just kind of wild. It's kind of funny. It's what it reminds me of for some reason.
I could see that. And then finally, seeing that Hood is taking on some responsibility for the Maib. It's about time somebody did.
Yeah, and not just anybody. Now, I don't know anything about this old boy Hood, but I'm assuming that to be the death god in any of these places, these guys are kind of like, they get the constant funneling of the dead, so I'm assuming that adds to their power somehow. So having some guy like this is very, I would think, make you feel a little bit of relief having somebody that heavy in your corner. Also kind of a little bit freaked out that you got someone that heavy in your corner.
Yeah. All right, great job tonight, Billy.
Yeah, great job, man. Enjoyed it.
You got any final thoughts before we drop off here?
Just a great episode. I really love that the Bod Night of Death stuff there. That's a core memory right there. And like I said, I remember I was kind of touching back on some of this stuff months back, not sure when, and I couldn't remember if we were right about everything, but I just remember some things about this, and having that line up with everything in Deadhouse Gates, that's just so cool. Absolute core memory.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Hey, we'll see y'all next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at horsefrogproductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.